if you consider your life as a rocket launch, so which stage do you think you are currently in and what is your destination?
Question. That's a very creative question. Obviously, so let's describe the rocket stages first. So you have a rocket that gets put together in various stages: stage one, stage two, stage three. Sometimes rockets have stage four as well. Essentially, the stage one is responsible for taking you out of the atmosphere. So all the atmospheric drag that stops you from getting into the velocity, orbital velocity, all of that is encountered by the first stage. Its job is just to take you from the ground up to like a 60 to 80 kilometers altitude. And if I would take an analogy to that in my life, obviously I'm not at liftoff, or I'm not at stage one. I'm probably I think I would say very close to payload deploy, and then recovery and reentry is next for me. I'm probably stage two, and I'm carrying this payload of my wealth of experience and knowledge. And what I want to do by deploying payload is basically spread out what I've learned to as many people as possible, because I know that when I was growing up, I would have benefited a lot from advice from industry professionals, in my stature now, and back in the day. I think if I would have, every time I talk to some experienced person, I gain a lot. So that is where my stage is. I'm stage two, trying to.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Space Science Podcast Series 4. Today we have Mr. Sanjeev Sharma with us, and principal engineer from SpaceX. And yes, you heard it right, SpaceX. So it's an honor to have you here, sir. And I am Prachi Verma. I am on a mission to connect youth and space enthusiasts and provide a platform to all these to grow in future and have a career ahead for and get a career guidance from all those engineers and scientists. So why we are wasting our time? Let's begin with our podcast. And before that, I would like to ask you, sir, one simple question. What made you to join me on this podcast today?
Yeah, sure. Glad to be on your podcast, Prachi, and hi to every one of your viewers. The only motivation I have at this point is, I've had a lucky path in my career, somehow turned out well, and I want to pass that on in terms of my learnings to the young people who are just starting off in life. It always seems very complex and very daunting when you're starting out, but I just want to bring them a note of assurance that with time and effort, everything pans out.
So I'm just so much curious to know all this which you have said. And when I was preparing the question, I was kind of confused. Like there were so many questions in my mind, and I thought of like, why don't we divide this podcast into two areas so that we can get more and much from you. So starting on from your journey, sir, from childhood to 10th standard, where we face a lot of, we have different dreams, where we think of lot of childish dreams, and we can do this and that, and 10th is the phase where we have to select what we have to do in future. So till that time, do you also face this, or you were particularly towards engineering that time?
No, that's a great question, actually. So particularly when you're growing up, the world is open, completely open to you, and obviously full of possibilities, as it should be. And every multi-talented individual has several different directions they can go in. And they're exploring sports, they're exploring arts, they're exploring, the subjects they're good at, the subjects they like, the things that they like to do. And a lot of them, they try out, and then they find that maybe this is not the best for me. Maybe I find more satisfaction doing something else. So it's perfectly fine and normal for, especially someone in the 10th grade, to be just discovering things for the fun of it, and just going into it due to curiosity, rather than having at that time a condensed or crystallized long-term goal. And that was kind of the case with me as well. I kind of knew very early on that I liked the science and math kind of programs. And my dad was an engineer, so I sat next to him when he was kind of repairing the things, and tearing them apart and stuff like that, which I completely loved, because I loved the idea that you could build machines that would perform as you think they would. And that's why I was kind of more bent towards the mechanical and engineering side of things rather than the medical and other scientific applications. Engineering to me seemed like an applied field where you could just imagine something, build it, and it'll perform exactly the way that you had imagined it. So that was a complete control sort of, and that gave me a lot of satisfaction when I played around with these things. So but by the time I was in 10th grade, for example, I did not know very much what I was going to do. I did know that I liked physics more than chemistry. I liked maths more than history. So I had some vague preferences, but I did not really know exactly where I would end up or go to. And so I basically found out my core areas and kept getting better at them. That is all I did by the grade 10. And that's I think if you can do that, that is great. Yeah.
So after like when you graduated, and I remember this seeing your post which got viral that you from railways you went to SpaceX, and that inspired a lot of us. And we want to actually know how did you actually took that the process which you took, because most of us sitting here we don't even think about how we'll go there. So I want to know the process.
Yeah. So actually, there is no process. I mean, the best thing to do about the future is not to think too much about it. All you have to do is like in programming, there's a term called dynamic programming. What it means is that at every level, and like in video games as well, like in every level, you decide what's best for you and proceed in that direction rather than try to pretend that you have complete control over the universe and plan your ultimate path from day one. And that's not much fun either. Like even if you're able to execute on it, it's not that much fun to. Often it's the journey that's more of interest than the goal. So yeah, I mean, I had not planned it that way, obviously, and I was very happy working in Indian Railways during my tenure. Then I basically decided I lacked depth in mechanical engineering. I wanted to do more in that, and I knew that by that time that having worked in mechanical design of rail cars for a long time, I knew by then that I wanted to stay in mechanical product development, electromechanical product development, and invent new things. And for that reason, I went to for a deeper study after like 11 years of working, which was a tough call, but I really thought that you only live once. If you really feel that you need to do something, if you really feel that you're born in this world to do for a particular mission, then you will only get that one chance. So whether the circumstances are the ripest or the best or not, you have to take the leap. So that's what propelled me to get to my master's. And US was a place where the R&D was really at the top at that time, and there was not as many opportunities in India. And US was also a place where I could get scholarships and get funded as an international student and stuff like that. So I basically gravitated towards a master's in mechanical engineering in US, and that's how I started getting into this research and design into cutting edge technologies. First, I worked for about 10 years in Seagate Technology, which is a computer hard drive development and design and manufacture a company, one of the biggest in the world for computer hard drives. And then after 10 years of doing that, I kind of applied elsewhere in the various industries. I wanted to change the industry because computer hard drives were getting out of fashion, being replaced by solid state drives, which is like the electronic drives. So which is why then I ended up with SpaceX. And that's kind of the route. I never planned from day one, if, going back to your question, on I will escape Indian Railways and I will do this and or that. That was never in my intent. It was mostly trying to excel at what I learned to do and what I was passionate about, and apply it and choose the best option at every stage. So
Yeah.
be strategic, but don't plan it out like from A to Z. You cannot do that. Yeah.
Yes, that's so great to know that, and you made it till there. So, if I see that from railways to aerospace, it's quite different domains and quite
Yeah.
different industry, quite different place as well. So, how did you started learning all this? How did you adapt your mindset? So, what the process did you went through after going to SpaceX?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of your viewers, I think it would be interesting to know. Um, Engineering is very different from other professions. For example, if you're a lawyer or if you're a doctor, from day one that you graduate out of training, you're supposed to be a professional. You're supposed to know the domain, and you're supposed to operate, as an expert. In engineering, however, most of the engineers learn on the job. What you learn in the training is just the fundamentals and how to get started. And when you learn on the job, a lot of that thing, a lot of your learning is domain dependent. So if you are, let's say, a mechanical engineer, which is a very wide field of applicability, and you go into marine technology or shipbuilding, or go into just the civil side of things and building some bridges and dams and stuff like that, or you go into rail cars or airplanes or cars. Those are the and which is why I think will change their jobs or industries, I would say. It's very different from one branch of engineering to the other. Like computer science, of course, is applicable across the board because there's a layer of abstraction that you can take with you, whether you're working as a computer, engineer, software engineer in Walmart or Microsoft or SpaceX. A lot of these fundamental programming principles remain the same, and it's all abstracted out into a place where you can actually port your skills. So when I first went from railroads, my first transition was railroads. I grew up in railroads, obviously, as an engineer, and I knew a lot of mechanical, like rolling stock and locomotives and rail cars. But when I started doing my research as a master's student in University of Colorado at Boulder, I was mainly focused on hard disk drives, which is completely a different world because it's micro motion control and very, very small parts, like or down to millimeters. I was dealing earlier with like several tons heavy kind of structures and designing those and designing suspension. Like the helical springs that I used to design were 6 feet tall in the high-speed rail cars. And all of a sudden, I had to now move to a world where things were, counted in micro inches because now we were in America. Like they use the imperial system, so micro inches essentially. But the fundamental principles in mechanical engineering were the same. So I used vehicle dynamics, I used finite elements, I used computer-aided design in rail cars, and those are the same principles and tools that apply in a different industry too. But even with that, I think it's always a very hard transition when you switch jobs. In fact, even before switching jobs, when I was in railroads for 11 years, and I suddenly took this leap into doing a master's, I found myself in a class of young graduate engineers from all over the world who had just graduated from their undergrad classes, and they were very sharp with calculus, with math tools, and with everything. And here I was, like I was sitting in the class and wondering which one is sine theta and which one is cos theta. Like I did not like obviously prepare myself to jump into, but what it comes back to is whenever you find yourself, it's for me. I think it's good to be challenged. I like the feeling of forming a knot in your stomach and not knowing where to go next, and then kind of working your way out of it. It's like a gaming challenge, right? That you're at a new level and you don't know exactly where to go, but you are relying on your native skills and ability to get out of that. So that is the kind of feeling you get when you change completely. But I think you have to fall back on your strengths and your confidence and your understandings of first principles, and then your ability to put in a lot of hard work. So yeah, I mean, I really don't look at the clock. I mean, even if I get awake by 2 a.m., I would start working or reading and trying to basically, even if there is no deliverable, like even if you are not put up against against a target that has to be delivered by this weekend, if you know that you have to progress in this direction, just don't look at the clock. Whenever you find time, just keep growing, just keep learning. And every job that you go to, learn not just the thing that you are supposed to learn, but also like 3, 4 peripheral things around it, so that you know where you can grow next. And those kind of things kind of help you out when you make transitions from, let's say, working to academia, from academia to another domain. Those are the kind of things that help you out.
That's a really valuable advice that we have received. All the listener would be hearing it. So, if I further on proceed with and end with the journey section, the last question which I would like to ask you about your journey was if you consider your life as a rocket launch. So, which stage do you think you are currently in, and what is your destination? So, by this, I want to ask you two-way question. One is that I don't know much about stages. So, could you let us know about that in short, and about
That,
your
that's
stage
a
as
very
well?
creative question. That's a very creative question. Obviously, so let's describe the rocket stages first. So you have a rocket that gets put together in various stages: stage one, stage two, stage three. Sometimes, rockets have stage four as well. Essentially, the stage one is responsible for taking you out of the atmosphere. So all the atmospheric drag that stops you from getting into the velocity, orbital velocity, all of that is encountered by the first stage. Its job is just to take you from the ground up to like 60 to 80 kilometers altitude, and leave the second stage with as much tangential velocity that's required for orbit as it can. And then the second stage takes over, and its main job is then to get into a tangential velocity that will become a stable orbit. And then the third stage is the payload, the thing that you actually want to launch or want to deploy. And so there are principally three stages, and in the mission phase, what SpaceX has added now is a re-entry and recovery stage, where so after the first stage is done with its launch, usually the first stage comes and crashes and burns in the atmosphere due to friction. What SpaceX has been doing is, obviously, as you all know, we've been recovering the booster and reusing it. So now there's a mission launch phase that did not used to exist before that now exists, which is re-entry and recovery of the first stage. And with the Starship program, SpaceX is also trying to do a re-entry and recovery of the spaceship, which is like the Starship. So this is just a broad description of what a rocket launch stages are, and in terms of where I find myself, if I would take an analogy to that in my life, obviously, I'm not at liftoff, or I'm not at stage one. I'm probably I think I would say very close to payload deploy, and then recovery and reentry is next for me. I'm probably in stage two, and I'm carrying this payload of my wealth of experience and knowledge. And what I want to do by deploying payload is basically spread out what I've learned to as many people as possible, because I know that when I was growing up, I would have benefited a lot from advice from industry professionals, in my stature now, and back in the day. I think if I would have, every time I talk to some experienced person, I gain a lot. So that is where my stage is. I'm in the stage two, trying to deploy my payload.
That's great, sir. Even I'm trying to do that because after listening to the podcast, people gain a lot of insights and indirectly they gain something in their life. So that's great to hear
Yeah.
that you are still in payload deploying stage. And so you do you think you are still not completed and you want to proceed further with your dream, any dream which is still left?
Yeah, of course. I think with everyone, we humans, I'm so this is personal. I'm not a believer in early retirement. I would want to work up till the day I die. I think and those are people who do those are kind of my role model. And it doesn't mean that I keep working in a job. I could probably go into teaching or coaching, or do something else like that, or have my own venture where I can kind of guide the process of a little bit more. But I do believe there's various next chapters in my life that I have to still explore. And like I said before, like in my world, I don't really think about the end point, and go to that. I just think about the present and see what's the best thing next. And for now, I think the best thing for me is trying to get this project through. Like whenever I've made transitions in my career, I've not made them for. Uh, I've obviously been strategic about where I want to head, and I kind of weigh every decision with care. but it's not for the next incremental pay, or it's not for the next incremental rank. It's mostly that I get satisfaction out of completing a project, which sounds a little funny because you're just one employee out of several thousands in a company, and it's not your baby, it's not your project. But once you start working on it and you develop a sense of ownership, then you feel gratified when that project succeeds. And that's how I kind of look at my life. When I was in Indian Railroads, my projects were bringing a small indigenous high-speed rail design into being, and delivering on providing a team, building a team that could understand computer-aided design, this, that, and kind of building a design team at the factory I worked in. So once all of that was fairly mature, then I looked at the next best option, which was the academics, and then after that, I went to Seagate, and there my project was to actually revolutionize, disk drive manufacture. So we basically, started with a very new concept that did not exist in the industry, worked on an electromechanical assembly, and I would say a very sophisticated device to make hard disk drives faster. And we achieved like 40 to 50% gains in productivity, which is huge. Like it was like $500 million worth of capital kind of was saved because of our inventions. And that project was kind of getting matured. And then I looked at SpaceX, and I went to SpaceX in my first tenure in 2013 to 2018. I worked on the first stage recovery and reuse, and I was completely, like you said earlier, like I was completely out of my depths because I had only done railroads and computer hard drives by then, and I had not done aerospace at all. But it was time to learn, and I learned during the job, and kind of progressed. And by these 6 years, we were already reflying boosters and recovering them with precision and all that. So that project was mature. And then I went into a drone delivery company in Silicon Valley. And there, I think the Federal Aviation Authority was getting this process started of medical drone deliveries and drone deliveries in the US. And did not have a template, did not have like a way to type certify the drones. And we kind of worked with them. And this small company that joined, Madanet, we became the first company to ever get a type certification for a small unmanned aircraft system from the FAA. And there were other competitors which were chasing this goal, which were like Amazon and Google and Uber and all of these big players. And we beat them out in that process, and actually we became the first ones to get this. And it's like it's a badge of honor. But that project was done, and then I came back to SpaceX to work on Starship. So right now I'm very, very keyed into the Starship program. So I look at transitions as where's the logical place to call this my role in a project complete. Projects are always ongoing, of course, in a big company, but getting it from like stage 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 is very satisfying. So that's how I look at transitions. Yeah.
That's great to know, sir. And if we move to SpaceX part, your SpaceX role, basically first when I read this principal engineer, of course I searched about it, but would like to know personally from you, what is the work of principal engineer there, and what are the project you are working on, or you will be working, or you have worked till
Yeah,
now?
so that is something I cannot really directly talk about very much because I'm not really authorized to speak to anywhere, outside SpaceX about SpaceX. I'm like I said, I'm just one engineer out of thousands. Uh, in general, in broad terms, I would mention that in the US there are two streams of career progression. One is technical path, and the other is non-technical path. And what I'd seen in India, that was true about 20 years back. I'm not sure whether it's true now, is that everyone who did engineering in India actually wanted to gravitate towards becoming a manager or get away from engineering. They were not passionate about engineering at all. Everyone that I looked around, like even IITs, 90% of the IITians would actually want to do IAS or IM or anything else and become a private equity, finance person. No one wanted to do engineering, and the main reason for that is that we did not value the R&D, the core technology creation function in India. And that's not the case with the US companies, with companies like SpaceX, with companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple. There are two career streams. One is purely technical, and the other is managerial. And sometimes these paths keep crisscross and then come out. So it basically depends on the individual. And the thing that's good over here is that the companies realize the value of technology creation and innovation. So individual contributors, like I'm an individual contributor, I don't really have like a big team. So that's not the role of a principal engineer. A principal engineer or technologist, when you hear the term, they probably have, if at all, one or two direct reports, but they're mostly focused on digging into technology and taking it to the next step and teaching the younger, mentoring the engineers in the team on what are the best practices and how to actually make themselves better engineers. So that is the kind of role of technology creation. And I've been a manager in Seagate Technology, and I've kind of come up to a principal engineer in SpaceX. It's basically, the way I look at it, management is fine, but when it starts taking too much of your time and distracts you away from the deep down work of an engineer, then I guess I would prefer becoming a principal and just doing that work. So coming back to your question, I guess in the US, a principal engineer is mainly focused on the technology creation and learning in the organization and taking the organization to a new directions, exploring new possibilities. And those roles are even more valued at times than very higher managerial levels. And that is actually the way it should be, because ultimately both are essential. The managerial skills are essential. Our management side of things is essential, obviously, for putting together a cohesive organization and maintaining its purpose. But on the other hand, you also have this engineer's role or the principal technologist role, which is also very essential. And I don't know if things have changed much in the corporate circles here in India, but certainly not in government. I'm pretty sure I've kind of have a lot of colleagues who are still in the government, and I'm certainly true that that's not changed, in Indian government, but in Indian corporate sector, I would hope that they are following this Western example and providing professionals with two career paths, each equally valued by the company. And what a principal engineer does is basically create more value, more technology, and open up new frontiers. What a management stream does is to implement that and actualize that.
Yes, even as you mentioned, I have even faced this myself that people are more towards in startups, and that's good. But focusing on engineering is also as important as you are saying, and I hope so. People will found that valuable. But if I talk about SpaceX, it's known for its crazy thing that it does, and while I'm looking at it, I will be like watching a fictional movie, and that the reusable part which you all said, reusable rocket, and how did you actually deal with this designing of it's a completely different and SpaceX basically has started it. So what were the challenges that you faced at the that your team faced at the starting, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, again, I cannot speak very much to the procedures, methods, or technology of SpaceX. I'm not the proper representative there. But I will give you a general template on how path-breaking technology discoveries and technology growth occurs in the US, especially in the US, because I've seen the ecosystem here. Firstly, you need to have someone who comes along and challenges the process. Um, I've been working, so like I told you, I've worked in Seagate Technology for about 11 years. And there the problem was different there. It was what I call convergent solutions, where the company really had like a 5 to 7 year roadmap of where to go. Their form factors or the technology set was clear. They used to manufacture computer hard drives, and they just needed to grow in some metrics, which is power consumption. Maybe it is like a density of bits on a square inch of magnetic media, or it could be seek time, or it could be the bandwidth of communication between hard drive and the CPU and stuff like that. So there were fixed metrics. There was a fixed technology box, and the challenge in the company was just to keep growing in that direction. And that's not like an easy challenge either, because if you look at the hard drive, from 1970s to about 2010 or 2020 even, the density of bits stored on a hard drive magnetic media has seen logarithmic growth. And there's a law in transistors called the Moore's law, which was basically explained by Intel's founder Gordon Moore, who essentially said that in every 18 months the number of transistors in a chip will double. And so if you look at, and that's what happened. He basically propounded this law back in the 1970s, 80s. And if you look at what the world did after that, it basically stuck to that in a log curve. And you'd be surprised that hard drives are actually, have been progressing even faster than that. So the first hard drive that IBM made was only some megabytes, and it cost about $500,000. And now you can kind of get a 4 or a 10 terabyte hard drive as well, for about 60, 70, 80, 90, or $100. So the cost curve and getting the technology down. So that was a problem with Seagate technology that they wanted to work on. It was a very convergent kind of a technology. It was dark. Sorry, not dark. It was deep and kind of narrow, and it just kept evolving down that path. Whereas in companies like in startups like SpaceX, or you can take other examples too, where now people are looking at the hypersonic travel again, or they're looking at nuclear fusion again. So all of these startups are now beginning to come back and work on divergent kind of problems. So there's a huge business need in the society for something. And if someone cracks it, if someone builds a better mousetrap than others, then they are going to be the first movers, and they're going to be the first in the market. And that's what companies like SpaceX are trying. And their problem set is completely divergent. They're going into white sheet areas where, or as we say, blue sky areas, where no other company has kind of ventured before or found it too hard. Maybe the technologies weren't ripe at that moment when they tried, but what these companies then do is completely do a lateral thinking, which is very different from convergent problem solving. It's a divergent problem solving. And that's what I found myself in when I came back to SpaceX. There was no precedent to having a liquid propellant booster getting recovered, preventing that from collapsing and burning up in the atmosphere, and then bringing it back down in precision, and then being able to reuse it was a huge challenge. But what you do with these problems, and this is like well documented by in several forums by leaders of SpaceX. There's actually very interesting books out there on this whole process. If any of your viewers or you want to get a very in-depth look into what really went on specifically with SpaceX, I would recommend the book. It's written by 𝒅𝒐𝒏𝒈. The first book is called Liftoff. The second book is called Re-Entry. And he's kind of walked very, very carefully through the process. I love those books because I was kind of involved in that process as well. But essentially, when you are in a very new process, you start off with first principles and say, why can't this be done? This is something that would be really, really good to achieve, but it seems that no one's achieved this so far. Why haven't they achieved it? Why can't this be done? So you start with that statement, and then you come up with everything that's causing failures, and then try to eliminate that one by one. From first principles, you take, that's why when SpaceX used to hire it back in those days, even now, they don't insist on like 20 years of experience in aerospace. They got me in from hard disk drives and railroads, which are completely unrelated. And anywhere you see a job requirement, you would see that companies are asking for 10 years of relevant experience in this particular field that we want to work on. Well, when a company is solving a totally divergent, a blue sky problem, they don't really ask. They shouldn't really ask that, because there is no one who in the world who's an expert in that. And people who have worked in that field but not solve the problem are probably not the best candidates either, because their mindset is now has this mental block that, oh, this is just too weird to even be asking to solve. So trying to get people from various walks of life with various expertise, but the people that have the desire and the drive to solve new problems is this number one step, and then asking fundamental questions, number two step, and then solving them iteratively, because if the science doesn't exist behind or if it's too complex to figure out with just analysis and just a pure theoretical approach, then you solve it with an iterative experimental approach. So these are two or three kind of principles that were applied in this process, and a lot of startups are now picking up on that and applying these processes also as well. Yeah.
So that's great to hear from you, sir. As we have time constraint, I would like to ask you a last question and end this session. Usually, I ask people, all my guests, as what the advice you would like to give to the youth. But instead, here I'll twist the question and I'll want to ask you that what is that one trait that you see the in any engineer who is trying to go into any space industry or anywhere should have that trait that will make it survive in any company or any space industry.
Yeah, sure. I think the one trait I would say is curiosity and drive. So a lot of engineers say that, I want to do this, and, I'm not really curious about how my outputs are consumed or how my inputs are derived. Uh, I think the more successful engineers that I've ever worked with are of the opposite kind, who are always curious on, hey, what are you going to do if I solve this problem for you? What are you going to do with it? Are you applying my conclusions correctly, or if you apply them differently, would there be a different result? And what are my inputs? So basically, trying to grow in your sphere of knowledge just for the heck of it at times is actually a trait that you should build up. Don't think about applications. Like I said, don't overthink your career trajectory. Don't overthink. When I used to work in railroads, I would often be told, "Why are you wasting your time doing this? You're never going to use this." And that's not the attitude you should have. But I go back to a famous quote by uh, physicist Faraday. He was the first one to have established any linkage between electricity and magnetism. So he had a demo where he basically had a coil and he passed a magnet around inside the coil, and then showed that a light bulb would light up every time he had the permanent magnet go through the coil. And at that point, no one had made the connection between electricity and magnetism. And so someone asked Faraday, some noble person in the UK, basically, they asked Faraday, of what use is this? Because it just seemed like a childish gimmick, right? A magic trick. And Faraday said, of what use is a new baby? He basically countered that. He did not answer the question, and I'm glad he did not, because if this was today's world, in Silicon Valley, so anyone who invents even a single thing is going to claim that this is going to be the next $1 trillion in economy, which Faraday could have easily said that, because he basically invented electromagnetism and all that flowed from it, including electromagnetic motors and everything. So the best trait I would kind of want to see in a young budding engineer or in any engineer, and kind of encourage, is curiosity. You cannot connect all the dots standing here, but you can apply yourself and understand more and excel. So that's all you can do. So that's what I would leave you with.
And really, that we all will keep in mind. As a engineer myself, I do keep that in mind when I give interviews for like clubs, and they ask me for the experience whether you have this. But I'll say I am curious. I will learn whatever you say, but I
Yes.
want a chance. So that's what even I follow. And thanks to you, sir, for being here, for giving your time. And I hope everybody will love to hear you. Will love to hear your story, basically. And that's a great to interact with you today, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you so much.